But I left the government because I resigned on principle, because the government had departed from its stated course. It had accommodated corruption, and I was the government spokesman on issues appertaining to the fight against corruption, and I felt I could no longer tell people with a straight face that the government was fighting corruption.
Are we there?
Yes and no.
Man.
If we seize this opportunity for accountability, for reforms, for change by Gen Z, we can be there. Let's join hands and let's do this.
Okay.
It's our country.
Okay. How does do you play a part in the reconciliation of the country?
At what time?
The country starts burning. Post-election violence goes.
Yes, Kibaki appoints me his lead negotiator, and he has already reappointed me Minister of Justice. I led his team. His team consisted of myself, Moses Wetangula, who was then Minister for Foreign Affairs, Sam Mongeri, he was also a minister. There was myself, Moses Wetangula, Sam Mongeri, and Mutula Kilonzo, representing the Wiper Party because Kalonzo had already been appointed vice president. So we did help the country to heal by negotiating the National Accord. Although we did not finish negotiating the accord on only one issue, whether the National Accord should be anchored in the Constitution. Kibaki, as our principal, had told us on no account. So when we failed to consent to that issue, which ODM was insisting, Annan took that issue to the two principals. And together with Jakaya Kikwete of Tanzania, they sat and made the both principals to agree to anchor the National Accord in the Constitution. So yes, we played a role, because the cessation of violence when the talks began was one of the few agreements that we agreed on at the start. The political settlement, which saw the country have a very large cabinet of 40 ministers, 50 assistants, and that kind of thing. And that is what informed the Constitution today, limiting the size of cabinet to 22. Then you add president and vice and deputy, and it becomes 24. Yet, William Ruto has circumvented that by appointing CASs unknown to the Constitution, advisors who have as big salaries as the cabinet secretary, triple, what are they called? PSs, principal secretaries, almost 50, more than 50 actually. Therefore making a total government of more than 200. Because I'm told the advisors, if you count all of them for CSAs for him, and they may run into almost 200.
The ones who have been limited to 50% have to go.
They may be running almost up to 200. Yet the Constitution expects that the CSAs you appoint are knowledgeable in the areas you appoint them and are actually your advisors. And you have senior officers in each ministry which advise your advisor, the CS. So you have enough advisors. You cannot create, through trickery, a government not envisaged by the Constitution. Yeah.
Martha, why can't the loser just go home? I watch basketball. I'm a fan of the NBA. Boston Celtics won. Denver lost. Denver lost. They don't get a cup for participation. And so therefore in politics, why can't the loser just go home?
I think the trick is to have free and fair elections. The loser went home in 2002. That's the difference. Because you have not won, you see? But if there is manipulation, to the extent that you have to hound commissioners of the Electoral Commission because they dissented, to the extent that the highest court in the land can make a ruling that translates to giving 3 a majority as against 4. Because commissioners were 7, just like that court. How does 3 form a majority? Absurdities, because we have refused to do our work.
Technically speaking, you've gone home. 2022. You went home, if I'm not wrong.
Went home how?
In terms of being in what I'm asking, in 2007 elections, after that drama, a position was then created because the loser didn't go home. Even though, what I mean, then I come to 2022.
A coalition government was elected.
Exactly. So meaning the person who won and the person who lost came to work together. But then in 2022,
because the dispute could not be settled.
But this time you went home. Basically, what I mean is when you ran,
we didn't form a coalition.
Yes.
But the election remains a blot because of the things that have happened. But the government was left to continue on its own.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But they are just about to form a coalition government. That's what the grapevine is saying.
The Gen Zs have said, and again we're coming to the handshake regime.
Me, I wouldn't be part of it.
I noticed, just to quickly go there, I noticed you didn't, you said you were coming to this, we had already agreed, first and foremost, just for context, we didn't agree this after all that happened. We had agreed this on Monday, before any of this had happened, early in the week. I looked to see, and I didn't see you there.
I wasn't even informed, and I wouldn't, because on 7th of December last year, I and NAKenya had held a press conference to reject the NADCO report and declare the NADCO report a fraud on Kenyans. Because the number one issue, cost of living, was not addressed. People didn't go to the streets because of an electoral commission, which was illegally sacked by Ruto. They went because of people issues. So you cannot tell us that you got something out of NADCO because you have addressed a mess deliberately created by William Ruto. You address the people's issue, then you can say we came out with something. You can't tell us NADCO has something because it gives jobs to the big boys, that it creates office of leader of opposition. That's not why people are in the streets. Yeah, so I wouldn't have been called to the receiving of NADCO or the signing because we've declared we are not part of it.
I like it.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's go into then this second term of Kibaki with the coalition government. Raila as prime minister, again, that's what I was saying. The position of prime minister is created and there's a president. Confusing even to the normal Kenyan who doesn't understand this political jargon. Yeah,
we tried the best in the agreement to create the work for the prime minister to coordinate all the ministries and departments of government. So he was kind of like the supervisor of all the ministries on behalf of cabinet. So president and vice president are not the immediate supervisors, it's the prime minister. And because I worked as Minister of Justice for 1 year after that, he was coordinating. We used to have meetings with him. And it was easy to work together even after all that fighting. But I left the government because I resigned on principle, because the government had departed from its stated course. It had accommodated corruption, and I was the government spokesman on issues appertaining to the fight against corruption, and I felt I could no longer tell people with a straight face that the government was fighting corruption. Issues of human rights, extrajudicial killings had started to rise again. You remember the killings of Mungiki and all that, and also killings of human rights defenders like Oscar Ouru, the extrajudicial killings even of ordinary Kenyans. I felt since issue of human rights and rule of law under my docket, I could no longer be a spokesperson of government. And the last straw that broke the camel's back, administration of justice, appointing unsuitable persons to the judiciary, and I exited at that point.
And there's nothing you could have done to fight from inside?
Now, if the president is not relying on my advice and I'm his advisors, if they just do things, I just say, this is it, I go home.
Wow.
Yeah, there's no need of receiving a salary and you're not applying yourself. Yeah, so I went to the back benches as a member of parliament. My pay halved because I lost the perks of minister. I lost the government vehicles. I lost privilege, but I gained peace and a lot of happiness.
That is, that's powerful to hear.
Yeah, so I couldn't have left Kibaki's government, which was much better than what I see, the coalition government, to come and enter something rotten. Yeah.
Okay. That's heavy. That's heavy to hear, especially because it's Kibaki's government that has been applauded by everybody.
The second term, something went wrong, and I think we all know that deep down.
Okay.
But the economic impetus, the growth,
still happened.
Still went on. Whether the benefit was felt by the people is different.
Yes.
And the reforms also were eroded. That's why the hospitals are not those hospitals you saw then. That's why the services in government offices are not those services you got. That's why corruption has spiked and continues to spike. Yeah.
Okay. And at all this time, again, I'll keep saying, I've not had you have a conversation with okay, Uhuru I had. In fact, I was shocked to know that you guys went together. But with the current president, do you see eye to eye with him? Have you sat down to have conversations about reforming the country? Does he get advice from you? Or are you just an opposition member for him?
I am not his advisor. But there's a time we've worked together in Parliament as parliamentarians. I remember in the constitution making in Naivasha, when there was a stalemate, we sat with William Ruto, I and William Ruto, and brokered 5 consents. When everybody was tired and we were almost declaring a stalemate, we took them to the plenary and everybody took them, and that's how we finished in Naivasha. We agreed on a random number 16 for the women in Senate. We agreed on allowing abortion being put in the constitution because we didn't want a fight with the church. So we just borrowed the language that was in the Medical Act, that abortion is not allowed except even the doctor's opinion. So we were changing nothing, just elevating what is in the Medical Act to the constitution, still giving the doctors power.
Permission, yes.
Then the third one, we made TSC a constitutional commission because we didn't want the teachers to oppose the constitution. I can't remember the other 2. I would have to go to the records to check. And we took to the plenary. So we may not agree on everything, but we were able to sit and discuss. The second time I have worked with him is in opposing BBI, we actually collaborated. But I made it clear that we collaborate limited to BBI. So after BBI, I went my way.
I love that. So it means that you can work with somebody who you per se don't see eye to eye on the basis of attaining a vision.
Because we had different...
The enemy of my enemy is my enemy.
What I was telling him that time, because I went to visit him in the current office, and I told him, look, we have our differences, because we have differences on policy issues. But we have worked together before to do something for the country when we were at crossroads. So, and I reminded him of the constitution. So now we were working together to defeat BBI, which was bad for Kenya. Although it had the 1 man, 1 vote, 1 shilling, it had something very bad, which he could now be manipulating himself. Because it was giving the president the right to appoint a sort of ombudsman, like an inspector for the judiciary, with power to start investigations against judges, meaning that the president would have a direct hand in the Judicial Service Commission to terrorize judges. Already, we have seen manipulation of the judiciary without him having such powers. What if he had? That was one of the worst things in BBI. You see, it had about 3 things, but that was the worst. So we collaborated, and they tried to woo me to join their side. And I had to tell him in a face-to-face meeting that in good faith, I cannot work with you.
Wow. Okay. Is that then when you decide, okay, and I'm fast forwarding again because of time. First of all, the Constitution, are you part of that? The making of the Constitution, which gets into...
I was part of the making of the Constitution. I told you from 98 we made the design.
Yes.
Okay? So we've come to the 205 one, it has failed. I am Minister of Justice when we do the National Accord in 207, and one of the tasks is to ensure that the Grand Coalition government was also to ensure that Kenya realizes a new constitution. I was responsible for supervising the making of an act of parliament that would ensure the constitution is finished in 1 year.
Wow.
And my team at the Ministry of Justice, led by one Gishira Kibara, who was then a deputy PS, led the team to make a self-propelling legislation that finished the review in 1 year. Kibara was later to become PS after I had left, during the tenure of both Wamalwa and Mutula. Yeah, he was the PS Justice. A very talented man.
Wow.
Yeah.
And that constitution has been impactful to this country.
Yeah, yeah, so I'm proud. And then in Naivasha, you know, now as a member of parliament, a backbencher.
Yes.
Yeah.
Wow.
And in parliament, thwarting the 500 suggested amendments to a document that has only 280 clauses.
Yes.
Yeah, we fought that.
What then makes you, and again, time, I'm cognizant about that. I'll keep saying that because I know sometimes people are in the story and they're wondering, why is he fast forwarding? But we are here and we can see.
Yeah.
What makes you decide, you know what, I'm going to run for the highest seat in office?
I think after working in the Ministry of Justice,